Hey, this is Scott Banzai. Today we're going to look at the Canon EOS RP. Thanks to Cameracraft in Rockford, Illinois for letting me try this out at their shop. The Canon EOS RP is the lowest entry price on a full-frame mirrorless camera yet. However, there are some other options that are still sold new, like the Sony a7 II, that are very similar in price and features. Ergonomics-wise, it is a very small camera, especially for a full-frame mirrorless. That is definitely a good thing in many situations, but it is also a negative if you want to use larger glass. I only used a 50mm EF lens on the camera, so I didn't have any real issues. I wasn't able to try out the grip extension, but I think that is a necessity for larger lenses. Overall build quality I think is a step up from the Canon EOS M50, but a step down from the EOS R. The buttons themselves are placed nicely for the hand. However, the grip on the EOS R is significantly better in my hands. I much prefer that one to the RP grip. The materials, the build quality feel a step up from the Canon EOS M50, but then a little bit of a step down from the EOS R. That's to be expected considering price-wise it's about in between those two. This camera is said to have the weather resistance. I don't know how good it is, but it does have that. The electronic viewfinder is a step up from the Canon EOS M50 in the size, but they do have the same pixel count. So I'm guessing they use different optics, but it's a similar setup. I didn't see any issues with the viewfinder. Of course, it's not going to be as good as the EOS R. You do get the 0.7x magnification versus the 0.62x for the M50. You have the fully articulating screen. That's a big feature of the Canons these days. I really like that setup. It's useful for a lot of situations, especially with video work or types of photo work where you really want to have different angles to adjust that screen and position the camera. It's a good setup. It's a nice way to have the screen function. When you turn the RP off, the shutter does not cover the sensor. I'm not really sure why they didn't include that feature with this camera. Maybe there's some technical, mechanical reason that it's a little cheaper to do it this way. But in the EOS R, the shutter does cover the sensor. So just something to consider if you care about dust and things of that nature. I really don't see it as a negative. It should be just fine as it is. The camera has no built-in flash. I think this is a little unusual for this level of camera. It is full frame, but it's targeted towards entry level, I don't know, some type of family use. And not having a built-in flash in this case is a little unusual. However, I personally don't want a flash in the camera. I do prefer weather resistance and just a simpler setup without the flash. It does have C1, C2, and C3 custom setting save modes. That's great to see. I really like that feature in cameras, so you can take settings, take groups of settings, save them into those custom areas, and easily switch between them. There are two dials to adjust settings, which is nice to see. On the back one, it has a lock. That's really interesting that they included that. As far as I can tell, the lock only is associated with that one dial. Overall, I'm a big fan of the button placement. I like it that it's a little simpler than the EOS R. It doesn't have that weird touch bar thing. And the mode dial in this camera is pretty nice to use. It's got those direct custom modes. In general, I like that button setup on this camera. On the bottom of the camera, you've got the battery door and of course the tripod socket. With the battery, the memory card is right next to it. I don't prefer this layout. It adds hassles to a lot of things, like if you're using a tripod. I do a lot of video work on my cameras, so with the M50 it has a very similar setup and it adds some hassles. Just something to consider with that. The camera uses an LPE17 battery. This is one of their smaller batteries, but is a little bit of a step up from the Canon EOS M50. However, it is a step down from the Canon EOS R. This battery is the same one used in the Canon M5 and the M6. Those are the mirrorless EF-M cameras. So if you have an M5 or M6, this is potentially a good option to at least transition over your batteries. I think owners of the EF-M cameras will be able to transition very easily to this one. A lot of the functions, a lot of the features of the M50 are in this camera. The way that they work, they're very, very similar. I used the EOS R before, and that is quite a bit different. This RP is, again, very similar to the M50 style of being able to control it with all the menus, all the features. There is a lot more added with RP compared to the M50. So if you want more functions, you want more features, and you do want to go to the new mount, I do think this is a good option for those people. Autofocus wise, it felt snappy, it felt quick. I was using the adapted EF 50mm f1.8 lens, so it was not an ideal situation, but I didn't see any issues with simple autofocus. I didn't try to do any tracking. Of course, with any type of sports situation, this camera is not going to be great, but I'll leave that to other people to talk about. Just general autofocus, felt snappy, it felt good. Very similar again to the Canon EOS M50. The camera has standard ports plus a few extras. It has the mic port, which is nice to see. Also has a headphone jack, which is a little bit unusual for this level of camera, but it is good that it is in there. Video wise, it's a little unusual. They exclude 24 frames a second. I'm sure you've heard that 10 billion times by now, but it's not in here, and it's really just based on their removing features from the camera for whatever reason. Because it does have the 30 frames a second, or if you're in a PAL region, you'll have the 25 frames a second. You only get one depending on which region you buy the camera from. I feel like that's a really unusual removal of those features, just very strange. If you use EFS lenses on the camera, you can only do 720p. That's again a very unusual thing. This camera doesn't have any type of in-body stabilization, but it does have the digital stabilization, which are very similar to the ones in the M50. One nice feature of the M50 that is also in the RP is the touch and drag autofocus. You can set it up to use your thumb or finger on the back screen when you're using the viewfinder to adjust the focal point. It's a very quick way to select the area where you want to focus. Focus modes on the camera are much improved over the Canon EOS M50. That's nice to see. You have a lot more options. Auto ISO has a minimum shutter speed setting on this camera. That's very nice to see with aperture priority. That's a big benefit. On the Canon EOS M50, they did not include that feature, and it's really frustrating. There is focus bracketing on the camera. That's a really interesting feature to have, and something that can be very useful with macro photography and other similar situations. The peaking settings on the camera are the same as the Canon EOS M50. They're very nice. They're well featured. Again, wireless features between the M50 and the RP look very similar, if not the same. There is a lot of functionality to the wireless settings. You can push images automatically. You can push them to a phone, push them to a computer. A lot of functions and features to connectivity with this camera. There is the My Menu feature on this camera, very similar, if not the same, on the M50. I really don't use it too much, but you can basically take settings from throughout the camera and put them into specific menus. Let's look at the Canon EOS RP. It is an unusual camera, relatively low cost considering the large sensor in there, and it is very compact. So if you want the smallest full-frame mirrorless camera, this is a good option. However, with the lenses, Canon is not releasing lower cost lenses. There is the 35mm f1.8. That's really your only option at the moment. That's relatively low cost and smaller. But if you wait a little bit, you can buy those high-end RF lenses and then buy this camera instead of the EOS R, just to hold yourself off until you can buy one of their high-end, better, fully featured cameras that eventually come out. It's hard for me to decide where this camera fits in the marketplace. I don't really see it going too well with the soccer moms or the soccer dads in the family photos, but maybe that's what they're trying to do. However, they include things like the headphone jack, which doesn't really fit with those users, and then it's just really strange where they positioned this camera. I don't know, it'll be up to you to decide if it fits for you, fits for what you're doing. As an M50 user, I really don't see this as a good option for me personally, but a lot of people that have the M50 have the M5 and do want to get into the new mount. I do see it as a good option. Let's look at the Canon EOS RP. Hope you enjoyed this video. Again, thanks to Cameracraft for letting me try this out at their shop. I'm Scott Photography Banzai. Thanks.